I was thinking about the name of this podcast and going big, and I was thinking, so many people that have ended up changing the world, they weren't necessarily trying to go big.
Right. And by the way, look at all those biblical figures you talked about. None of them have that life plan.
Right.
They were tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, buddy, you need to step in here.
Like you interview Mother Teresa as a teenager and say, now, how are you going to change the world? And she'd say, I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to love my neighbor, right? And so I think sometimes, I think J.R. Tolkien was interviewed about this, about like hobbits have so much to teach us about what it means to be a small person in the world, to feel like there's big, powerful people doing big, powerful things, and I'm just a little person over here. And yet he wrote a really lovely story about how little people end up doing quite astonishingly big things, right? And I think there's something about that in the character of God, that God loves to use little people to do big things.
Welcome to the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and this is the place where we celebrate bold moves and big ideas. Each week, I sit down with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a significant impact in their careers and in their communities. Whether you're looking to level up your leadership, pursue your passion, or just get inspired to take your next big leap, this is where those stories come to life. Now, if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else you tune into podcasts, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in to what it means to truly go big.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Going Big podcast, where we interview change makers and visionary leaders about how they have gone big in a different way. And I am so pleased to have with me today in a studio here in Richmond, Virginia, the Reverend Dan Marotta of Redeemer Anglican Church, which is in Richmond, Virginia. And as you're about to see, Dan is more than a spiritual leader. He has gone big in terms of really reaching out through his church's congregation, through himself, into the community, and is building something that's special. We got a lot of going big questions to ask him. And Dan, it's just such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for making the space available here in Richmond.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's so fun. Welcome to town. We're glad you're here. Kevin, it's great to see you again. You and I overlapped in a previous season of life, both lived, in the Northern Virginia area. And so I hadn't seen you for a minute.
Yeah.
But it's good to be in the same room as you again.
Well, it's good to be with you as well, and I'm going to note some other connections as well, but I was born in Richmond, so it's good to be back down here.
There you go.
As crazy as that
So I'm actually in your city.
That's right, yeah. I guess, in a way. It's been a long time since I've lived here, but it's a great, great place, and we used to always call it the center of the universe, but that sounds about right. Everybody feels that way, but Richmond has its own special place. Well, Dan, since we're recording this at a time close to Advent, close to Christmas, I'd like to lead off by asking to you, for people listening, wherever they may be in their own faith journey, let's just say, whether they may be believers or seekers or agnostics or what, or of another faith, whatever, what to you is Advent, Christmas, and who is Jesus Christ?
So those are big questions, not small questions.
But this is the Going Big podcast.
I'm feeling
Dan.
already the name of the podcast coming up. It's great. If it's all right with you, I'm actually going to answer those in reverse order, because I think it might help listeners. So, and I'm a priest, and I'm going to answer the way maybe a priest would. So,
awesome. And by the way, in all fairness, I asked the same question last year this time to your good friend Sam Ferguson of the Falls Church Anglican. So I'm just giving you a sense that you're in good company. All right.
Well, and if my answer doesn't make any sense, I'd say they can just go listen to Sam's answer.
I know yours will make a lot of sense.
So I would begin with, we believe that there is a God, and that the God of the universe exists in what we would call in the Christian faith a Trinity, the triune union of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that I begin there because when we talk about who is Jesus, what we believe and are convinced of is that Jesus is the God the Son incarnate in a human being. And therefore, some of our listeners might be familiar with the theological term, the incarnation. And that leads us to what is Christmas? That at Christmas, we look back and remember and celebrate the incarnation of the second person of the Holy Trinity into human flesh as a human being in the world. And Advent, therefore, is a season of the church liturgical calendar where we anticipate really the arrival of Christ in two ways. One is a backwards look, where we cast our imaginations back to the past and we remember what was it like for the people of God to wait for the coming of the Messiah. And they did not know, we do with 2020 hindsight, but they did not know that the coming Messiah would actually be God himself in the flesh. And then that's the backward look. Then there's the forwards look, where we think about the promise that Jesus made to his disciples and to us that one day he will return. And so you might say the church today lives between two Advents.
Wow. Well done. All right. Well, I just dropped that question on you.
Sure.
It was like going big. I think you did a great job with that.
Well, it's
Thank
the
you.
right. I love that we start there. This time of year can be so. I won't put this on anybody else. I would just say for me, distracting.
Yeah.
My mind is filled right now with what am I going to buy my teenage kids for Christmas? Right.
Totally. That's why I like Thanksgiving in a way better, because it's less pressure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Frying a turkey is way easier than shopping for your kids.
Yeah. Okay. That's a Richmond thing to say. It's frying a turkey, but okay. All right. Well, continuing this along, Dan. Yeah. So I know a little bit about your journey, but not a whole lot. So I want to know, who is Dan Marotta? I had the great fortune of actually I was born in Richmond, but I grew up in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I grew up in Culpeper. I went to the College of William and Mary. I know that's a journey that you took.
Yes, sir.
I think our paths probably diverged at that point, but who is Dan Marotta? And then, of course, I'm going to follow up with, how did you choose to go into ministry? But let's first establish a little bit more who you are.
Well, yeah. So you're so kind to ask, and I really only know I think any of us only know how to answer that question in terms of story. So I would say, a little bit of my own story might be similar to you. Grew up in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Charlottesville, just a little bit south on 29 from Culpeper. Yeah. That's right. And my parents are wonderful. We have a very close relationship today, and we always have. Both of my parents are believers, are Christians. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I've got a younger brother and 2 younger sisters. And so grew up in Charlottesville, went away to college at William & Mary, just like you, go Tribe, and had 4 great years there. While I was in undergraduate studies, sometimes, Kevin, we think about these landmarks or, sort of defining chapters in our own story. And I would say my time in undergraduate college at William & Mary, I went through a couple defining chapters. And some were sad and some were really joyful. On the sadder side of things, during my college year, especially during my freshman year, Kevin, I lost a lot of friends, meaning a number of my friends died. Oh, and these were peers of mine who were 18, 19 years old.
At William & Mary or elsewhere?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. One was a friend from high school that died in Fallujah in Iraq. Another was a guy who lived in the dorm room right next to me on our freshman hall, who tragically died. He was hit by a truck on campus biking to class. Yeah, really sad. And it absolutely wrecked me. And my life went into a tailspin. I almost flunked out of school. I just stopped going to classes, didn't show up to exams, was really not in a good place. And through the kindness of parents and pastors and older, wiser Christian young men, really, faith became for me, I would say it moved from, hey, this is something that is generally important to me, to this is the most important thing to me.
Oh, wow. So you did not go to college with the view that you were going to become a minister?
Oh, absolutely not. I went to college to be a marine biologist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
I did not know this.
I grew up reading, like Jacques Cousteau, and I thought, well, I want to go live on a boat and sail around the world and discover new species of stingray. And hey, that still sounds pretty good some days, but no, I had no ministry. especially ordained ministry. I mean, Kevin, especially ordained ministry to the priesthood, not on my radar at all. But my freshman year, I came face to face with mortality in a way that maybe not every 18-year-old experiences. And it came through pain and it came through loss. But I really had to wrestle with the, big questions in life. Life is short. We're all going to die. And that really shook me and rattled me. And it made me reconsider the place of faith in my life. So I would say that was one thing, and that's on the sadder side of things. On the more joyful side of things, I started volunteering with a Christian organization called Young Life, which perhaps you and maybe some others are familiar with. And it's an outreach ministry to middle school and high school students. And I jumped in to volunteering with Young Life, and there I found, Kevin, a really good fit. I loved it. And, my friends at the time would say in college, I majored in Young Life. It was just where I was at the high school every day. I volunteered to coach the lacrosse team, and I found so much joy, so much purpose, so much satisfaction in really giving away my time and giving away my energy to being with these young, high school guys, some of whom had just gotten out of juvenile detention for dealing drugs. And so I kind of poured myself into Young Life, and somewhere along the way began to kind of scratch at that question, hey, maybe I'll keep doing this sort of thing after graduation. Wasn't really sure if it would continue or not. And then during my senior year of college, I got a cold call, and it was from my home church back in Charlottesville, Virginia, asking if I would come on staff in the youth ministry. And, I got to admit, Kevin, I initially said no. I thought, I don't want to move back to my hometown. I don't think I want to move back to my home church. And as much as I've enjoyed all this Young Life stuff, ministry with teenagers, it's been a lot and I'm a little tired. I think I'm ready for a change and do something else. So I said no. And in the months that followed, I graduated from college and was trying to figure out what was next. I was dating the woman who would later become my wife. And so I thought, she still had another year of nursing school at James Madison University. And Kevin, I just thought, well, I'll just move there and I'll get a job. And I had 2 jobs lined up. I was going to work selling cars during the day, and I was going to be a bartender at night. And I was going to save up money to buy a ring and ask her to marry me. Wow. This was my game plan at 22.
Okay, this is quite the journey. My goodness. Wow.
So hang with me. The story's almost done. So this is my game plan at 22. This is what I'm going to do. And through the kindness and intervention of some really wonderful people in my life, multiple different people who don't know each other at some point along the way kind of pulled me aside and said, I really think you should reconsider this job in ministry. I think it might be a great fit for you. And so I had to go back. I listened to them, and I went back to my girlfriend and said, baby, I'm sorry, I'm not moving to town. I'm actually going to take this ministry job instead. And she was, wonderful and super supportive. And so I took the job, doing youth ministry in a church back in my hometown, thinking I'll do this for 1 year. I'll give it a shot, do it for 1 year. And Kevin, that year turned into 6 years. And along the way, my girlfriend graduated from college. We got married. We bought a house, got a dog, had a kid. And we went through a lot of these kind of growing up years together. And, by the time I got to the end of those 6 years, we knew together that there really was a sense of calling here. This was what the Lord had in store for us. And so at that point, it was time to head off to seminary, get some formal theological training, and begin to take seriously the reality that we might spend the rest of our lives doing this.
Wow. Well, Dan, I discovered earlier that you have your own podcast, and we actually started, I guess, around the same time. We've been
That's right.
about the same number of episodes. What I have found in doing these interviews, a large degree unexpectedly, the Going Big podcast, is what comes out is finding your calling, finding your gift. What are you called to do? What is your contribution? And then the other is mentors, which we'll come back to in a moment, the importance of mentors. So this was not your calling when you went to college. You were going to study marine biology.
Yes, sir.
Do you think, your calling was always there, your gift, and you found it in this way? Or what, looking back, obviously these life circumstances affected you, and there were conditions that were set up ahead of time. You already had an exposure to the Christian faith, but do you think this was your calling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really like the way you asked that. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a priestly move here. I'm gonna start with scripture and then work backwards to kind of us. So when I think about the different callings that we see take place in the story of the Bible, you might think about the call of Moses in the burning bush. You might think about the call of Isaiah, where he's sort of lifted up into the throne room of heaven, and the Lord is saying, who will go? And he says, here I am, send me. You might think about Jonah, who's called to go to Nineveh and he doesn't want to go, and then you have the whole, big fish incident. You might think about the calling of someone like John the Baptist, or the way Jesus called the disciples. Mm-hmm. In each one of those situations, you have this really unique moment where someone receives a call from God and it's unmistakably from God, meaning the person being called is not confused about what's happening. They know exactly what's happening. God is speaking to them. The call is, you might say, authoritative. You should say yes and you should not say no, as Jonah found out. This is not a call you can decline.
Right.
And the thing, Kevin, though, is that throughout the story of the Bible, there are then all these other people who, for all we know, don't have a call. They're just, as a friend of mine likes to say, Joe Israelite.
Right.
Just your average person. And they're not called to be a prophet. They don't have sort of a special calling. They have just sort of an ordinary, mundane, everyday sort of thing. And it's important to remember that we are not Moses. I'm not John the Baptist. I'm not one of the disciples. I'm not Jonah. And so when we think about calling today, one of the things that I often will, and I used to do this a lot when I was in youth ministry, because high school seniors are thinking a lot about calling.
Sure.
Maybe almost more than anybody else at their stage in life, other than like young adults who are thinking about getting married, right? And they're asking questions like, which college should I go to? And if they're Christians, they're asking, which college does God want me to go to? And then they're asking questions about, well, what major should I choose? And what career and what path? And all of these big questions about, will God lead me somewhere? And one of the things that I used to talk to high schoolers about when I was doing youth ministry is, well, what has God already called you to? And we would look through the Bible and we would just think about, what are the calls that are out there for everybody? And you might think about things like honor your father and mother, serve the poor, love your neighbor. There are calls that are already there. And I used to tell teenagers, what business do we have asking God for a special calling if we're ignoring all of the callings that are already there, right? What business do I have?
Really fantastic. Dan, I'm so glad you're sharing this and your willingness to share it, because what I have heard so often, and not just in this year, but it's kind of culminated in this, very few people know early on what their calling is. Very few people said, I knew when I was 5 years old, I was going to do this. Okay.
Yeah.
I think maybe Newt Gingrich knew he was going to be Speaker of the House or something like that.
I think he might have known.
A few exceptions, right? But it comes in different ways. But then I've also had a lot of people who've listened to this who say, but I still don't know what my calling is. Yeah. Am I failing? Am I missing it? What have you? But what you're saying, as I'm understanding, is the calling is in many, many different ways. And one way to be ready and be attuned to it is even to engage in prayer and to try to understand what's going on. What is this? Are you sending me a message? Or am I not listening? What's going on?
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. There's so I'm going to totally butcher this quote. So any listeners who know how this quote actually goes, please forgive me, or maybe you can send me the how the wording actually works. But I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said something along the lines of, grip the handle at the smooth end. And what he meant was, if you're picking up a shovel or a tool or an instrument, there's kind of the normal way to hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't go looking for your weird, unique, special way of doing it. Grip the handle by the smooth end just means conventional wisdom. Do things the way that most wise people would agree they should be done. And sometimes I think, Christians can sometimes fall, when you're asking questions about calling, I think there's sort of two sides of the horse we can fall off on. And one side is to think that, God's not really involved in my life. I'm just sort of putting my head down and putting one foot in front of the other, doing my thing, go to school, go to college, get the job, just sort of American dream track. And what that person needs to hear is, hey, God wants to be involved in your life. And maybe there is a unique call and you need to start listening and paying attention and praying and asking, right? Be open towards God. But then there's another kind of person. And the other kind of person actually really craves the special. They really want a special, unique Jonah or Moses call. Right. And to that person, what you need is Jefferson's, hey, just grip the handle by the smooth end.
Got it.
Jesus has already told you a lot about how to live. Why don't you just start there?
Awesome.
And,
all right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And now I understand why you're a very effective pastor as well. All right. Very, very good. Okay. So when did you decide to go all in for ministry? I mean, was there a point?
When you say all in, do you mean?
Well, you went from, you were a youth pastor, you were sort of uncertain, but then you made a major commitment of your life. And we're going to talk about the church that you helped start, you birthed, and then others now that you're doing. But you made it, presumably at some point, like a big commitment, like, okay, I'm all in. Was there a moment, or was it gradual?
Yeah, so it was gradual, but as with all things, and again, I'm going to butcher the quote, it happened slowly and all at once.
Got it. I know. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
There was sort of a slow burn where in my years of youth ministry, which is my very first time being on staff at a church, which, can be disillusioning for some people, where you sort of realize, churches and ministries are led by humans, and humans are flawed and broken and disappointing, and nothing's ever as glorious as it appears from a distance, right? But there's also some goodness and some real heart in the work. And so somewhere in those 6 years, my wife, Rachel, and I decided, yes, this is it. We're not going to go do something else. We're plowing this field.
Well, Dan, my impression is it's not easy to be a pastor these days. I think it's probably never been easy to be a pastor.
Yeah.
But I think given so much in the world today, everything from the influences of social media and dealing with even some of the aspects of artificial intelligence, but just where society is and the sort of division that exists and the nature of our economy, and so many ways, there are a lot of pressures on a pastor. And so I'm going to kind of jump in, and if you don't mind, just help our audience understand, what is it like? I know you're not going to make this about you, but you have a sense for talking to others, and I'm sure there are others who can't do it. They start and they just can't do it anymore. What's it like?
Yeah. Well, it's very kind of you to ask, and I'm in the general scheme of things, I'm still kind of a young pastor, so part of me wants to say, ask me in 20 years. But I do have 18, 19 years of full-time ministry under my belt at this point. And so I would say along the way, I've learned the challenges of shepherding and counseling and teaching, and then in church world, just administrating a large organization. They're all still there. But in our present cultural moment, some of the challenges that have been added to that have been things like pastors are just categorically less respected than maybe they used to be, a generation or two ago. If you see someone in a clergy collar, to an older generation, that visually signals respect,
totally,
and safety.
Right.
If you ask a younger person, anybody under the age of 40,
There's
when
real
you see
skepticism and
someone,
cynicism,
I
isn't
would
there?
say child molester is the
Right.
first thing that comes to
Right.
mind, right? And so there's a default, right? And there are legitimate reasons why some people would react that way, but that inhabiting our cultural imagination for what ministry is, every movie that depicts a pastor or a priest, they're either the villain or they're an idiot, you know?
Right.
And so, I mean, even I'm navigating that with my own kids right now as we watch movies and TV shows
Right,
together.
right.
And they're like, why is the pastor always stupid or evil? And it's like, yeah, we got to contend with that. So, okay. So you just have less cultural credibility than you used to. And to be clear, I don't think it's actually right for me or anybody else to complain about that per se. Because when I look back at church history, I mean, there are harder times than our own time. And so, yes, we've got some challenges. Maybe it is harder now than it was in, say, the 70s or the 40s or 50s or whatever, but it's still not nearly as hard as it was in the first 300 years of the church,
true,
right?
true.
And so
But let me ask you,
not much to complain about.
If I could,
Sure.
although you don't know what I'm going to ask, so I'm just going to ahead and do it.
Yeah, fire away.
It's when, for example, an accusation is made about a clergy member. We want to presume innocence and give that person the benefit of a fair trial, but then but the circumstances are such. You have, what do you do?
Yeah.
That's a really crazy space, I think, especially for clergy.
Yeah.
What do you? It is
crazy. It is a crazy space. No, you're not wrong at all. And that is so very much the cultural moment that we're inhabiting right now. Leaders are falling. And, I think there are healthy and maybe then less healthy ways to think about what that means. So on the one hand, you might say we're living in an era of the celebrity, and we have Christian celebrities. And I think we have to ask ourselves, hey, do we need saints or do we need celebrities? And so often we look at the saints of history, they weren't celebrities in their own time.
Right.
They were actually very small, obscure people in their own time.
But we find out later.
The virtue and the kindness and the service and the humility. And so we honor their legacy, right? However, in our own moment, we have the Christian celebrity, and they might be famous for their talent, but maybe not for their virtue, right? And so when there's a fall, it can get pretty ugly. Another thing to think about, and I was talking to somebody in our church just about this the other day, about how when a math teacher acts out and does something inappropriate, embezzles money from the local elementary school, harasses a kid or another teacher or something, everyone in society agrees that's bad.
Right.
That person should be removed from that position. But we all continue to believe we still need math teachers.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
We should still have schools and still have
great
math
analogy.
teachers. Right?
I couldn't agree with you more.
And the problem is in the church, when a pastor or a priest falls, it calls into question the whole thing.
Yes.
Should the Christian faith even exist if this is what the leaders are like? Right? And so there's just an extra gravity and weight to it.
I think this is a very, very difficult thing that we all contend with, whether those who are in the faith or outside. It's all right. We're going to change gears. I'm going to come back up to something you brought about in terms of celebrity culture.
No. This is the moment we're in.
It is, and it ultimately is tied to going big, because people go big in different ways. And as you say, there are people who act with extraordinary virtue and integrity and are not rewarded in the space, but we look back in time and see them as role models and as people that we should pattern our lives after, which now leads me to the question about mentors. All right. Were there mentors in your life that were important? I mean, you talked about this period, your freshman year in particular in college, but have there been mentors that have been key in helping you develop?
Absolutely. And I feel so fortunate. And I would say, Kevin, one of the ways in which I feel most, I would say, rich in my own story is in how kind some older people have been to me along the way. And so I would just hit a couple along the way. I would say as a bratty 7th grader, God put J.R. Briggs in my life. And J.R. Briggs was the college intern at our church. And he reached out to me and he dragged me to a summer middle school Bible study on the book of Philippians. And I did not want to go, but he got my parents' permission to come pick me up anyway. And we went. And I just have always looked up to him. And I still do. And some people, he's just well known enough that some people might actually recognize his name because he's continued to write books and to speak. Another person would be Carver Bolton, who was my young life leader in high school. And he volunteered to be the assistant coach for our soccer team. And Kevin, I don't think he was at the high school every single day, but it sure felt like it. He was there all the time. And when I think about what it means to pursue people, I think about J.R. Briggs and Carver Bolton as like I go to you. I don't wait for you to come to me. When I get to college, I think about a pastor I had named Pete Bauer who was willing to, it was a little church with like 50 or 60 people that met in Charles City County, way outside of town. And he would drive all the way into campus just to do a one-on-one Bible study with me. And I think about a guy who he had 4 kids. He had all kinds of other stuff he could be doing. I mean, it's like borderline irresponsible how much time he was wasting with me. And yet, just when I think about what it means to be generous with your time, I think about Pete Bauer. Later on, when we get to Denver, the pastor of the church that we worshiped at in Denver, his name was Brian Brown. And man, he was so kind to me and so good to me. And just gave me opportunities. Like he just gave me a shot. And when I think about what it means to like actually give a young person a shot, maybe before they're ready, I think of Brian Brown. And then, we moved to Northern Virginia to the Falls Church area, and I had the wonderful privilege of apprenticing under John Yates, somebody we both know and love. And John is in many ways for me a spiritual father. And he, not only was so kind to me, but as a role model, I got to watch him lead with grace, with patience, with wisdom. And I was always astonished at how not stressed out he was.
Yes.
Given
I don't know how he does
given
it.
all that was going on at the time. And when I think about what it means to be calm in the midst of chaos, I think about Yates. There's other people that are on my list, but I'm going to stop there.
Okay, this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as you know, I recorded a wonderful episode with John Yates earlier this year. He's just extraordinary, and he has such a gift. Well, we're going to talk about one of his gifts as it relates to you. But let's just first, on this idea of mentorship, for those listening, based on your experience, and those are great illustrations, how would you counsel first we think about looking for mentors or even acting when we are being mentored?
Oh, yeah.
Because many of those illustrations, you didn't seek those mentors, but tell us from your perspective on that.
So, I would say 2 of them I did not seek and 2 of them I did. So, I talk with younger people about this, especially young men. And what I often hear is, hey, I wish there's an older guy who would just love me and mentor me and pursue me and take me under their wing and teach me. And we'd spend all this time together. They'd be like a second dad to me. And they don't really say it all quite that way, but they're sitting there by themselves, not doing anything, pining away that somebody would notice them. And, hey, my heart goes out for anybody that feels unnoticed, but that's, if you want to be mentored, that opportunity probably is available to you, but it's going to require some initiative and some action. When I was a kid and I had guys like J.R. Briggs and Carver Bolton pursuing me, I still had to respond.
Right.
I still had to say yes, get in the car, say yes, go to the thing, I do some listening. There's a participatory element to that. You got to respond. And then when I think about, my time in Denver with Brian Brown and my time in Falls Church with John Yates, those were more men that I sought out. And I asked, I sort of wanted them to be that for me. And that required taking the risk of asking.
Right. No, that's my next question.
Yeah.
Because I'd say whether it's fear of rejection or just not knowing how to ask, or we think these people are just too busy, or I would say a lot of people who seek mentors don't know how to ask and don't quite get to that spot. And so you were fortunate in the first two examples where somebody saw you and looked out for you. That doesn't happen to all of us.
Sure.
And then with respect to seeking a mentor, we don't always have the courage to do that. So any special advice?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So asking is scary. They might say no. My advice
Do you use
to anybody,
the term mentor, or do you just ask for some advice?
This is going to sound a little weird. I would ask for a first date. And what I mean is, don't go to somebody you don't know and propose a long-term relationship.
Right.
That doesn't, what I mean is ask for, is like,
that would be kind of creepy.
That'd be a little weird. Yeah. You go to a stranger and say, will you mentor me? It's like, no, that's no good. I would say, hey, go get a cup of coffee, go get a beer together, go get lunch together, and just ask them questions. That's it. Just bring and prepare. Bring a list, bring your little journal, write down a lot of questions about you that you have about life or career or work or faith or whatever it is that you feel like is your area of need. And you can tell them, I want to buy you lunch and I want to ask you some really important questions. May I please have an hour of your time to buy you lunch and ask you questions? Kevin, I don't know anybody who would say no to that.
I'm with you. And I would have said a couple of years ago, there'd be plenty of people who say no, but it's been the prevailing view among very high level people that they all would say yes. And so we should be encouraged to do that. It's an honor. Yeah.
I mean, if a young guy comes to me and says, may I please have 1 hour of your time? So it's it's limited. I need to know that there's an end date or an end time, right? I'm not committing forever.
Right.
Hour of your time, buy you lunch, ask you questions. I mean, for me, I just feel honored.
No, that's great advice. Okay, now let's flip it.
Yep.
What should mentors do? That is, those who mentored you, looking back, and now I'm sure you are mentoring different people in different ways. How does a mentor do it best?
So I'll use me. What I'm looking for is a teachable spirit. I'm looking for hunger. Who really wants to learn? There's nothing more frustrating than trying to teach somebody who's not interested in learning.
No,
who's not hungry.
That's an awesome point, because you don't waste a lot of time. I mean, if you have somebody that's motivated, you're kind of getting to business right away, so to speak.
Absolutely. So I'm looking for folks that are hungry, that are eager to learn, that have that kind of teachable humility. And
do you suggest the first date? That is to say, hey, would you like to grab coffee sometime, or try to, grab what do you do?
Yeah.
And by the way, there is an element of social awkwardness to this as well. We have to be kind of conscious of it. And
yeah. I would say, I don't think I've ever just proposed, hey, how about I be your mentor?
Right.
Because that feels a little presumptuous and arrogant.
Of course, yeah.
What I'm more likely to do is invite them to do something with me. So there might be something I'm working on, and I might say, to a younger guy, hey, I'm working on this and I could use some help. Would you like to come do this with me? Here's what it means. We're going to go do this together, and I'm going to sort of teach you how we do this. And I might use that as a trial run. And let's see how it goes. Right. If it goes well, then maybe we'll work together again. And I know I've found when it comes to, for women, it might work differently, but for men, often elbow to elbow is a really good way to learn together. So I don't often start face to face. I kind of start side to side.
Yeah, I had an Uber driver recently who's full of wisdom and suggested, going on a walk is a lot better. You don't have to make eye contact when you have some of those tougher initial conversations.
That's right.
It was really interesting. But we talked about John Yates, but we know he has a gift for identifying and raising up talent, and I keep asking him for advice about it, and he's given some, but he just has that's one of his gifts. But it's such an important contribution in the big picture as well. Okay, I want to switch gears again.
Yes,
now,
sir.
we learned about you're going into ministry. In my judgment, Dan, what caught my attention with respect to reaching out to you about going on the Going Big podcast was what you did about starting a church in Richmond and then building this with the help of others, obviously, and you've got a great team, and then even now going further. And so before we even go into what you're doing in the community and other things like that, could you just help the audience understand what does it mean in terms of a vision to say, I'm going to start a church in Richmond, Virginia? You didn't grow up here. You didn't go to college here.
Yeah.
Why? How did this come about? And how does it happen?
And planting a church can just kind of be a crazy thing to do. I mean, so yeah, I won't bore everybody with the whole long, tedious story, but I will maybe hit just a couple high water marks that led us there. So,
and by the way, it is seemingly counterintuitive because people think, oh, church membership is declining. People are breaking away from church. Why would you start a new church? Aren't there enough churches out there already?
Yeah.
So keep going.
So yeah, this is a really crass analogy. So this will bother somebody, and please forgive me. This is not Kevin's fault that I'm saying this.
You're forgiven.
Is it easier to start a healthy new business or to repair the broken, dysfunctional culture of an existing business?
Right.
It's easier to start a new one. So, and by the way, I am not comparing the church to a business at all. It's like, I don't believe that. That's not my philosophy of ministry or theology at all.
No, but to be fair, I mean, you even noted earlier, I think most people see a minister as a preacher because that's the biggest point of exposure that they may have.
Got it.
They may have a little bit of seeing them as a pastor, and you can explain the difference in the conversation.
Yep, sure.
But they don't know about you're having to hire and fire and build a team and make sure you've got property and the neighbors are okay with you, and there's a replacement for the youth director that just left, and
that's right.
There's a leak in the back of the church or whatever it may be, on and on and on.
Yeah, so it is complex for sure, and developing, starting, and then kind of sustaining and nurturing a healthy ethos and a healthy culture amongst a community is a remarkably complex and difficult thing. It's even harder if what you're inheriting is already dysfunctional. It's easier to start from scratch both are hard, but one is harder. So I would say church revitalization is the hardest kind of work I know. And I would say church planting is the second hardest.
Wow.
So when I think about church planting,
what does it mean? What does church planting
mean? So when we talk about church planting, what we mean is conceiving of and visualizing and then articulating and persuading and gathering and forming a congregation where before there was no congregation.
Which is a big deal, very complicated. This is not like, Little House on the Prairie. They go out one day and erect out of wood timbers a new church and ring the bell at the end. And
church
there we
planting
are.
doesn't mean building a structure.
Exactly.
It means gathering of people.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And so, I mean, it's exciting, it's invigorating, it's also, hard and painful. It's all of the things you might imagine. It's also, though, Kevin, how the church began. So again, if we go all the way back to Scripture in the New Testament, the Lord Jesus commissions his disciples to go out into the world and to make more disciples. And the Apostle Paul, who is not one of the original apostles, but is the apostle who's late to the game, converts from Judaism to the Christian faith. Well, we would say he actually retains his Judaism, but he becomes a Christian as well with Jesus as the Messiah. And he then begins to go all around the Mediterranean planting new congregations, forming new churches. And really, when we think about church planting, what we're talking about is simply missionary work. And so I would say church planter is really just a subset of missionary.
Amazing.
I just didn't go overseas.
Right.
I just went down the road.
Years ago, I was in Ukraine, well before there was so much strife in Kiev. And there's a statue to the apostle. Wait, who is it? Which one? Who went there? Now Andrew, there's a statue to Andrew.
Wow.
Who went, and I guess he ultimately went all the way to India.
Amazing.
And these things, and then churches grew as a result. It's extraordinary, but it's different today. Yeah. Where are we now, and why did you form a congregation and start a church here?
Why Richmond?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and why where we are in Richmond?
Sure.
For 99.9% of those listening, they don't even know where we're talking about. Maybe Richmond, Virginia is the capital of Virginia, but why here?
Yeah.
And why precisely here?
We're in Carytown right now, just south of the Museum District and just west of the Fan District. And so we're not quite center city, but we're close. And why Richmond? So a number of reasons. One is I had siblings that had moved here and dear friends from college that had moved here. So there were people here that we already knew and loved and who, loved us. And some of them were encouraging and inviting us to move here. And a couple of them were even saying things like, you guys should come plant a church here. Metro Richmond at that time, and it continues, is growing rapidly. And population growth has far outpaced church growth. So if you think about in terms of percentages, Richmond is becoming a less church city year over year as population grows and as church growth does not keep up. So church growth decline. The churches are in decline, and population is growing. And so with the direction those two arrows are going, we had a relational invitation from friends and family, and we also perceived a real need, a missional need. Now you combine that with, once I got connected to John Yates and the Falls Church and the Diocese of the Mid-Atlantic, which is the one I'm a part of now, I learned that this particular network was really hoping to plant a church in Richmond, but that they hadn't found anybody to do it yet. And in my very first conversation with my first bishop, who's now retired, Bishop John Guernsey, I was still living in Denver, exploring all of this, sort of jiggling the doorknob, so to speak, seeing if this was the right path, seeing if this was a calling. And got on the phone with Bishop Guernsey, and, I told him that, I was thinking about moving back to Virginia. I was thinking about the Anglican tradition. I was thinking about church planting, but I wasn't really sure. And so I figured I probably ought to talk to a bishop since I had never spoken to one before. And he very calmly asked me on the phone, well, Dan, let's just hypothetically say you were to move back to Virginia and you were to plant a church, and let's just say for the sake of argument that it's an Anglican church, where would you like to go? And I said, well, through the kindness of some friends, our invitation is to go to Richmond. And he just started laughing. And he said, Dan, I've got 100 people in our diocese that pray every year for someone to come plant a new Anglican church in Richmond.
Well, give us the sort of 2 to 3 minute rundown of how what has happened since then. And then if you would sort of put the icing on the cake with the new church plant.
Sure thing. So, very briefly, me and my wife Rachel and our 4 kids, we only had 3 at the time, but now we have 4. We moved to Richmond in the summer of 2016. We did about the only thing I know how to do to gather people, which is to throw a barbecue in our backyard. And we
good idea. Good food is always a good prescription.
It helps. And Kevin, I had driven down to Richmond almost every Friday for 2 years during my time on staff at the Falls Church to meet with people down here. And there were days where I would sit in a coffee shop for 12 hours and have 12 one-hour meetings with various people that I had gotten connected with. And I would just have the same conversation over and over again about this new church plant that we were really excited about, and would they consider being a part of it. And so by the time we moved in the summer of 2016, and we invited all those people I had met with, we had 90 people come to our backyard for a barbecue.
Wow.
And then that fall, we had a couple kind of introductory orientation meetings to talk about, hey, what are we going to believe? What do we practice? What is really the ethos and culture of this new congregation that's forming? And then first Sunday of Advent, to bring us all the way back to the beginning of this conversation.
You're very good about bringing and connecting dots, so very good.
Redeemer had her first public worship service. And that was November 27th, 2016, in this little white chapel on the corner of Park Park and Meadow in the Fan District.
Okay.
Probably 1.5 miles from where you and I are sitting right now.
Gotcha. And you essentially rented out an existing
Yeah, we just
structure?
rented some space.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you now have your own space?
Not yet.
Not
so
yet.
we, in a couple weeks, that answer will change. So right now, our church is under contract on a building.
But you're where you worship at a place now.
We worship in a rented space. So we actually rent from a synagogue. Here in town.
Wow.
And they worship on Saturdays. They have Shabbat services on Saturdays, and it was empty on Sundays. So it's a really lovely arrangement.
That's amazing.
And we're all very friendly with each other.
And then there was then a vision for starting another church on the south side of the James River. Is that right?
So we have sent out, I would say, 2.5 church plants so far.
Wow.
The first one I would say is half because we teamed up with another church that offered funding. So another place offered the funding. We offered the kind of on the ground local support. And we kind of helped a new church plant launch in May of 2019. And then in 2022, we sent out another church plant that was sort of the first one that was really formally just coming from our church. And that church is called All Souls Anglican Church, and they meet just south of the river in the Manchester neighborhood. And then in 2024, we sent out a third church plant, Resurrection Anglican Church, and they meet down in Midlothian, a little bit further away.
Amazing.
And now we've got a fourth church planter who just started with us 2 months ago.
So this is the guy that started his freshman year at William & Mary, went through a rough time, going to do marine biology, and is now through, to some degree, the mentorship of John Yates and others, this idea of just continuing to expand. So this is a great example of going big. I have another sort of current church-related question, and then I want to begin to bring this to a close.
Yes, sir.
So we're soon upon Christmas. Church attendance grows during that time. Christmas Eve services, whatever, it's, what is it, lilies and poinsettias, or poinsettias and lilies, the people who come just for that service, and again on Easter.
Mm-hmm.
You want, obviously, more people to come so that you can reach them. And you now, in a modern society, have all these different means of communication to reach out to people, and you can utilize social media and things like that to some degree. I don't know whether the right word is ambition, but presumably you have an ambition to grow and reach more people. How do you balance that? Because I think there's always the risk that it begins to touch on the celebrity nature of things that you talked about, because celebrity draws more. How do you balance the desire to reach these growing numbers of people, which could be described as ambition, with the very motivation for why you're doing it, and the humility and the faithfulness? How does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, I don't want to go on for another hour because I know we're almost done. But what you're putting
Mark
your
Twain
finger
said,
on is,
Mark Twain said that few sinners are saved after the first 20 minutes of the sermon. So I am with a preacher, but you go at it. You
I'm
go ahead and
100%
answer the
with
question.
Mark Twain also said in the beginning of a letter to one of his friends, he said, "Dear friend, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one."
Yes.
So
yes. I don't know if you've read the Ron Chernow biography of Mark Twain, which came out recently.
Oh, yeah.
It's really amazing. He was a fascinating guy. But we won't go there. I'm diverting everywhere. So let's get back
the
on track.
unscripted answers are longer than the scripted ones. So, I would say it's an ongoing, I think it's a temptation for everybody. And I would say that's it's just a cross field.
We're doing a podcast
disciplines.
right now.
Yeah, here you go. So when I think about, I would almost frame your question under, like, what does it mean to have sanctified ambition? How can you really have a strong drive and passion for something to grow and to flourish and to do well, but also have, an ever shrinking ego? And, or maybe as Saint Tim Keller would say it, self-forgetfulness, right? Like just thinking about yourself less, not thinking less of yourself, but just
Which, by the way, this touches on the
just not
area
being so preoccupied.
Yeah, but this touches on the very area we talked about earlier of where people get into trouble.
Absolutely.
Because generally they're getting into trouble because they're thinking about themselves rather than about others.
Yeah. So I think there are safeguards you can sort of have in place, and no one of them is enough. And even all of them might not be enough. But I think it's something you have to lean into constantly. And those might be things like, for me, I have a bishop who's in charge of me. So I'm not a lone ranger. I'm not like a do my own thing guy. Like, I'm part of a system. I live a life under the authority of somebody else. Somebody besides my wife gets to tell me no.
Yeah, that's funny, by the way. I just did a interview with Tim Bush, who's a very influential Catholic layperson, but he made this, from a Catholic standpoint, this very same point that you have to have, in his judgment, this element of authority.
Absolutely. And it's not a guarantee of virtue, right? But it is a safeguard. It provides a check. Another one might be, how much are you willing to give away to other leaders in your community or organization, whether it's a church or something else, right? Is it always you up front, or are there other people whose voices are heard, right? Another thing, and this is maybe a little bit more internal, is this is going to sound a little bit masochistic, and I don't mean it this way, but like, for every new person that joins the church, I'm trying to ask myself the question, is this someone I'm willing to suffer for? And the more people that join, you know what that means?
Yeah, the suffering
more
increases.
suffering, right? So reframing it as, instead of like, the growth of this thing means the growth of my ego. Look how big and important we are. We're doing cool things. Instead, it's, well, this growth is actually going to lead to more hardship and maybe more pain and more suffering, but hopefully from a place of love for their flourishing and their growth. Because that's what this is about in the first place, right? And so there's more I could say. I mean, I have other little silly things I do, like, I do a weekly podcast, and I've written some books, and I'm working on another one, and those kind of things. But when it comes to things like social media, I actually have my assistant do all the social media stuff. And I might, about once a week, I will download Instagram, log in, and just sort of check to see if I've missed any messages. And then I log out and I delete the app from my phone.
Yeah, I've heard that from a few others, especially clergy.
I don't want to look at it.
Yeah, no. But it's a very interesting space. Yeah. Well, thank you for you've been very generous in sharing a lot of insights, and I didn't give you much preparation for these things I was going to drop on you. Yeah. So as we draw it to a close, I'd like to ask two questions of the guests. The first being, thinking back on a younger version of yourself. And this is nice because you've already told us a lot about, but let's say go back to like an 18-year-old, 20-year-old version of yourself, given all that you've shared with us, but what would you tell that younger version of yourself today, now knowing what you know, to have done any differently? Because it's a good way for all of us to kind of learn new life lessons.
Oh, gosh. I just tell myself to stop being such an idiot. In seriousness, I'd probably just tell myself to stop worrying. Because I think, and I know that if,
worry
a
doesn't get us
30-year
very
older
good.
version of me now could talk to me now, he'd probably say the same thing. Like, just stop worrying. Like, it's going to work out. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, yes, bad things will happen, and then other good things will happen, and none of it will be what you think it's going to be. Just like, receive it. Just receive the days as they come.
Any more advice to those of us who worry all the time? And you can start worrying about worrying.
Oh, yeah. I'm feeling anxious about how much time I spend being anxious. Someone much older and wiser than me shared this with me years ago, and the mental image has stuck with me. I'm someone who, just by personality and disposition in my own broken dysfunction, tends to think that I have to make things happen, and that things happen through sweat and grit, and that you drive forward into the future.
Yes.
And the thing is, that is an overinflated sense of my own importance.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that about you,
yeah.
but I totally agree with that view.
But you would be right.
Yes.
And I'm just, slowly learning, as God is very patient with me, that the future is something to be received as it comes. I'm in the river. The river I'm floating in time downstream. I don't have to make it happen. I can participate. I have my own little work to do, but it's just that it's little. Like, it's okay to be, I'm not trying to, I was thinking about the name of this podcast and going big. And I was thinking, so many people that have ended up changing the world, they weren't necessarily trying to go big.
Right. And by the way, look at all those biblical figures you talked about. None of them have that life plan. Right. They were tapped on the shoulder and said, hey, buddy, you need to step in here.
Like, you interview Mother Teresa as a teenager and say, now, how are you going to change the world? And she'd say, I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to love my neighbor. Right. And so I think sometimes, I think J.R. Tolkien was interviewed about this, about like hobbits have so much to teach us about what it means to be a small person in the world, to feel like there's big, powerful people doing big, powerful things, and I'm just a little person over here. And yet he wrote a really lovely story about how little people end up doing quite astonishingly big things, right? And I think there's something about that in the heart, in the character of God, that God loves to use little people to do big things.
Well, see, you were so appropriate for the Going Big podcast. All right, bring this to a close for, again, kind of similar to the opening question, for anyone listening around the world, wherever they may be in their own personal faith journey and wherever it may be in whatever way.
Sure.
From your perspective, from your experience, from your learning, from everything, what would you suggest to those listening about how they can think about going big in their lives by finding their contribution, their gift, living that life of meaning and purpose? Reverend Dan, kind of send us out into the world right now.
I would just, this is going to be underwhelming, but I would say prayerfully pay attention to what's in front of you. You don't need to be dreaming about what's going to be in 20 years or 10 years or even maybe necessarily next year. Like, be faithful in the moment with whatever you've been given. And who knows, maybe later you'll be given more to be faithful in. But it does, if you skip the little in favor of just doing big things, you probably won't even be ready for the big things.
Yeah.
Right? You got to lead little things before you lead big things.
Well, good advice. And don't be anxious about the future either, which ties into all of that. Yeah. Well, Reverend Dan Marotta, folks, I hope you'll check out Redeemer Anglican Church in Richmond, Virginia. It's been a real pleasure being with you today. I'm so glad we could do this.
Kevin, it's great to reconnect. Thank you,
sir. Thank you. Peace be with you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling energized and ready to tackle your biggest goals. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps spread the word, and it gets these inspiring stories out to more people. You can also find more content, resources, and updates at our website, goingbigpodcast.com. Remember, the only limits are the ones you don't challenge, the limits that you impose on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and above all, keep going big. See you next time on the Going Big podcast.